Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Tomb Raider Underworld walkthrough. This is it. The final part of the story. And, unfortunately, we're out of time.
Shut it down! Lara, unexpected, but I'm glad you're here. You should be allowed to see firsthand the fruits of your labor. That's the Midgard serpent. Of course not. Jormungandr is the network of tectonic ridges that encircles the Earth on the ocean floor. And we stand now on its weakest point, where the ancient supercontinent Pangaea first broke in two. When this relic unleashes its fury below, the very seams of the planet will burst. The Midgard serpent will rise up and spew poison into the air. All the world will be consumed by fire and ash. Ragnarok! The seventh age is upon us!
And so this is it, the final level, the final part of the main story. As I said, we don't really get a final boss, unfortunately. Our final boss is basically just stop the reactor that's basically the most basic I can put it. It's a bit I mean, it's a really cool section, and it's quite challenging, don't get me wrong. I mean, I died numerous times throughout this. Thankfully there's no treasures or anything about, so there's nothing to worry about there. But yeah, it's just a little bit anticlimactic after the... well, I mean, considering you had the rather cool fight with Amanda in Tomb Raider Legend, and the somewhat cool fight with Natla in Tomb Raider Anniversary, this is kind of a little bit of a dampener on the whole thing, because there is no fight. Sure, you get to kill off a couple of Yeti thralls and just other thralls, but that's about it. Now, obviously I've already gone into about the Midgard Serpent and Jormungandr and all that jazz. But I haven't talked about Ragnarok, which is basically what Natla is trying to cause. So essentially, Ragnarok is the end game of Norse mythology. So it's a huge battle that's, well, between the gods, that ultimately leads to the death of many of them, including Odin, Thor, Tyr, Freya, Heimdall, and Loki. So it's like big endgame stuff. And there's also loads of natural disasters, and the world gets kind of submerged in water. But after that, the world resurfaces anew, and it's fertile, and the surviving and returning gods will meet, and the world will be repopulated by 2 human survivors. So in many ways, the end of Norse mythology is very similar to Noah, and like flooding the world and repopulating it with the good, basically. And Ragnarok literally means fate of the gods, or in its other form, which is Ragnarokr, which is basically twilight of the gods. And that was popularised by Wagner in the title of the last of his During des Nibelungen operas, Go to Damerung. So, yeah. And the supercontinent of Pangaea was indeed basically when all of the continents were all together, and then it split off, and we get the situation that we have today. And what's quite cool is that Wikipedia has a nice little map of what we think Pangaea looked like. And that's just pretty awesome. Now, throughout this entire section, the worst that you're going to have to put up with is some rather difficult platforming. You are going to have Natla throwing fireballs at you throughout the entirety of it, but really she's not too much of a hassle apart from on a couple of flat areas where you don't really have much of an option to be able to avoid her. And she can get rather bothersome there, but that's about it. There is a moment where there's an adrenaline moment, which I think... Oh, it's not quite here, but there is certainly an adrenaline moment where she'll fire fireballs at you, and it's a little bit, well, very stressful, but you should be okay. I have no idea how I made that jump, but I will accept it and move on. Now, what I was discussing about Amelia Croft at the end of the last part, because obviously she became a thrall in the end. She couldn't survive long enough. But what's really quite clever, I don't know whether this was an intentional thing or just a coincidence, but the Norse goddess who presides over Helheim is called Hel. I believe I did mention her when we entered Helheim. But what's particularly important is that in the Prose Edda book Gylfaginning, they describe her appearance, which is as half blue and half flesh coloured, and further as having a gloomy, downcast appearance. So, obviously, when we came across Amelia Croft, half of her face, well, half of her body was normal, and the other half was the blue, thrall-like stuff. So, in a way, Amelia basically became Hel. As I said, I don't know whether that was an intentional little thing or not. Also, this is the adrenaline moment I was talking about. As long as you either jump very quickly, you're fine, but yeah, I got hit. It's not a problem. But yeah, I don't know whether to give Crystal Dynamics that much credit for figuring, or at least making that parallel. But it is very, very clever. And I would certainly say it's more clever than their whole thing that they decided to go with in the Tomb Raider reboots. Because that was just... that was even more ridiculous than this, and that game was trying to be realistic with its supernatural stuff, which was a little bit balmy. And also it went through its paralleling really, really clunkily and made it an entire plot point, and it was a bit like, that's not quite as cool as a potential parallel that wasn't maybe intended, considering they did all the research into Norse mythology and all the other underworlds. I'm assuming they can't have been unaware of the potential comparison. I mean, considering it like 5 seconds on Wikipedia and I had that information, there's no way they couldn't have. But whether, I'd like to think that they did decide to consciously go with that, because that's quite cool. But we are basically coming to the very end of this level into the game, because this is our penultimate, I believe, reactor thing to break. Because there's 3 of them, as there generally always is. And I mean, getting rid of the final one is really awesome. But you have got to do a little bit of busy work to get to that point. Also, you may have noticed that there are a massive amount of health potions throughout this. And I mean, the reason for that is because obviously potentially you're going to get hit a lot. And my guess is they didn't want you to die from combat at this point in the game, which is fair enough. I mean, it would be kind of daft if you are being... the intention is that you are meant to feel like a badass, and if you died during combat during this, that would be a little bit anticlimactic. But having said that, you are probably going to die quite a lot if you ever so slightly just mistime your jumps, because it can be just disastrous for you. Like, one mistimed jump and you will fall to your death and have to redo a little bit. But yeah, the other cool thing is that obviously Amanda is helping us to try and save the world, which I never thought I'd quite see happen, because she's always a bit of a lunatic. Although she is a little bit of a Deus Ex Machina. Like, very much so, because if she hadn't saved us from the doppelganger, we would have been screwed. Unfortunately, we cannot do anything to attempt to rescue Amanda right now. We've just got to finish our job. Which is actually a surprisingly very simple job. I mean, I kind of died trying to do it, but it was more getting onto one of these platforms that was the problem. Because it's a rather terrifying jump that you've got to try and make. And then also you've got to climb all the way to the top of this and not die. There's a point somewhere towards the top where they start throwing steam at you, and if you get hit by that, then you will potentially be flung off and all the way to the bottom to die a horrible death. Now, come on, Lara, round the corner, please. Thank you, there we go. Now, I have to say, I'm not quite sure what the runes are that go all the way up and down this column. My assumption is that it was something kind of useful and maybe Norse. I'm honestly not 100% sure, because I don't... well, other than English, I don't know any other alphabet. Or at least the well, Roman alphabet, because that's technically what it is. But either way, we drop down here, and we will end up right at the final thing, and that's our boss fight done. As I said, it's not a boss fight, and it's really anticlimactic, because that's the end of our gameplay. But having said that, the actual ending itself is, I suppose you could say, mature in the way it handles things, which I quite like. It's a decent ending to the trilogy. Could have been a bit better, perhaps. I mean, quite a satisfying slaughter of Natla there, but yes, I'll let you figure out what you think of this, and then give my final thoughts on the game when we reach the credits, which are sort of long, but I've seen way, way, way longer. Yes, we've saved the world! and now we kind of trapped in hell, but hopefully we'll be able to find a way out.
After killing the Midgard serpent, Thor dies from its venom anyway. Not if you clear the corridor and get us out of here. Out of juice, just like Bolivia. The good news is we saved the world. The bad news is now we're gonna die here. Huh, just like your mother. Wait. Mother must have tried to use it to escape, but didn't know how. If pulling out these artifacts always brings you here, what will happen if I'm already here? Maybe you'll go to hell. Damn it. I can't reach the sword. But you can. What about you? I can reach you if you hold out your hand. You trust me? We're out of time, Amanda. So it's back to this, is it? What? You think we're even? Would killing me make us even? Goodbye, Mother. Rest in peace.
And with that, Tomb Raider Underworld is complete. That, for Kyle, is a rather sad in memoriam, because on the 18th of December 2007, Kyle Mannerberg, who was, the lead level designer on Tomb Raider Anniversary, and I think also on this game, died from a brain hemorrhage. And so they basically did this game, or at least dedicated it to him, which I think is a really lovely thing to do. And what's really nice is also that he is depicted in a portrait on Lara's yacht, which is really sweet. But yeah, that's the end of Tomb Raider Underworld. Now, obviously, it has quite a lot of problems, don't get me wrong. But I do really like it. Like, as much as its lack of decent combat, and also, lack of a final boss do get on my nerves, and also the smallness of the treasures, and just sometimes the areas are a bit too big, and all of that, I do really like it, and it was my first full Tomb Raider game, so I guess that's kind of part of the reason why I have such good feelings towards it. And also, I do think that the plot is quite well done. All of the tying together at the end was just really, really clever. One of the things that I absolutely adore is just the animation that they did on Amanda's face when she's deciding whether to save Lara or not. Because it's surprisingly mature. And that you can see that I could leave her to die, and that would be great, but then can I live with myself after that? And it's just great. And I think, also the fact the game is absolutely gorgeous. And I would say that, as I have said earlier on, in some instances, in certain bits of the animation, it is superior to the reboot, which is bonkers. Like, stupidly bonkers. Obviously, like, all the foliage and stuff they got a lot better at, but it still looks good even today. I don't think the weaker versions of the game, like the Wii and PS2 versions, look anywhere near as good. I've had a look at them and they are hideous. But as it appears here, it's great. And it does just make me sad that they've veered off from this and decided to kind of get rid of the heritage, almost. Because there is stuff to work with here. There was so much potential to do other things, but they didn't, and that's just really sad. Now, while this is the end of the main story, I am going to be showing off both of the DLC episodes, or levels I should probably say, which were rather annoyingly to people who owned a PS3, Xbox 360 exclusives. You can see that the Crystal Dynamics close association with Microsoft started around here. It's rather uncomfortable, but that is the case. So I will be showing both of those off, and also just some extras. So there's not a whole lot in the extras, so that's going to be a somewhat reasonably nice and contained part, but I think that's pretty much all I have to say. I like this game. It's flawed. That tends to be the case with, I think, a lot of the games I like, and I think I do wish that there was certain elements that were improved on this, but I can enjoy it for what it is. And one last thing before I say my goodbyes. Apart from pointing out that the audio editing in some parts of this game is awful. You probably could tell the fact that the music just cut out before the credits started. Stuff like that just miffed me off so much. But also, I just really like the colours of these credits. It's like my favourite colour combination, black, white and blue. That's a really odd thing to end the walkthrough on. But thank you all so much for watching the Tomb Raider Underworld walkthrough. And if you've also watched my other Tomb Raider walkthroughs, I hope you enjoyed them as well. Just thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I hope you will join me in the DLC parts, and also the extras. And I also hope you join me for my next playthrough walkthrough, which will be beginning very soon.